In the far reaches of the Orion Arm, the Galactic Empire stretched across countless star systems, and its fleets ruled the void with iron command. The Empire's banners fluttered proudly across conquered worlds, and no voice dared to rise against their will. For thousands of years they had believed themselves untouchable. Their technology was unmatched. Their fleets were vast, and their enemies always ended as dust in the dark. Among their admirals and commanders, the mere thought of defeat was a story for children, a thing that happened only to those who lived before the rise of the Empire. But one night, deep in the silent sector of the frontier, something changed forever. The first sign came to an isolated listening outpost known as Delta 7. It was a small facility orbiting a barren moon whose only purpose was to monitor deep space frequencies. The operators there lived dull, repetitive lives filled with static and silence, until the moment when a faint, irregular signal appeared on their scanners. At first, technician Jarrell Van thought it was a glitch. His instruments were old and often gave false alarms, but the pulse continued steady and rhythmic like a heartbeat in the emptiness of space. It was not a natural frequency nor any known communication pattern. He tried to trace its source, but the readings made no sense. The signal seemed to come from nowhere, not from hyperspace, not from any star system known to maps. It came from the void itself. Hours later, Jarrell called his superior officer, Caleth Rowe. They studied the data together and ran every diagnostic test possible. The results showed no interference, no malfunction. Something was forming out there, something large and powerful. Caleth ordered all telescopes to focus on the coordinates, and soon the image came through the monitor, a shadow in the darkness slowly taking shape. It was not like any ship they had ever seen. Its surface reflected no light. Its design broke every known pattern of engineering. It looked alive, as if the void itself was folding around it. Before Caleth could send a full report to the Imperial Command, the lights of the outpost flickered. Then every console turned black. The last thing Jarrell saw on the radar was the object's position moving directly toward them. At that moment, the entire outpost was consumed by a flash of blinding white light. Then there was nothing but silence. When communication with Delta 7 was lost, the Empire dismissed it as a meteor strike. They had no time to worry about a small station on the frontier. However, days later, 3 more outposts vanished in the same region. The pattern could no longer be ignored. A secret council was called aboard the Imperial dreadnought, Ferrithor. The room was filled with high-ranking officers and scientists, including Admiral Threxon, known for his cold logic. He studied the reports in silence. His expression remained calm, but there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. He ordered an immediate investigation and dispatched the 9th Imperial Fleet to the sector, consisting of 23 heavy warships and thousands of soldiers. As the fleet jumped through hyperspace, the crew whispered among themselves. Some believed it was the work of rebels, others thought it was a new weapon from one of the outer races. But deep down, everyone felt the same cold fear. The Empire had never lost an entire outpost before. When the fleet exited hyperspace, they found only debris floating. Among the stars, the wreckage was strange, twisted as if crushed by invisible hands. Their scanners detected faint energy traces, but none matched any known weapons. Suddenly, the sensors began to scream. A massive gravitational fluctuation appeared. On the edge of the system, space itself seemed to ripple like water disturbed by a stone. Then the void tore open, and something began to emerge. The light from nearby stars bent around it. The crew on the bridge stared in disbelief as the shape took form. It was a ship enormous in size, black as obsidian, with sharp geometric edges that seemed to cut through the darkness. There were no running lights, no insignia, no signal of identification. It did not come from hyperspace. It simply appeared. Admiral Threxon rose from his command chair and ordered immediate scans. The readings that came back were impossible. The ship's core emitted an energy output greater than anything in the Empire's database. It was a level of power they had never measured. Before the Admiral's voice broke the silence. "Prepare weapons," he said. "Targeting systems online." The fleet moved into formation, their cannons glowing with energy. The comm channels crackled. Then across every frequency, a voice was heard, calm, clear, and human. "This is the Terran warship Retribution," the voice said. "You have trespassed too far into restricted space. Withdraw immediately." The entire bridge went silent. Humans were known to the Empire, but they were insignificant primitives from a distant planet. Earth was a world the Empire had classified centuries ago as low priority, a developing species under observation. The idea that a human could command a warship of this scale was absurd. Threxen hesitated for only a moment, then gave the order to fire. Thousands of plasma rounds and antimatter shells tore through the void, toward the strange ship. The explosions lit the darkness like a supernova. But when the light faded, the ship still stood untouched. A faint blue shimmer surrounded it, absorbing every bit of energy from the attack. Then the Retribution moved. Its massive hull glided silently forward. The ship emitted no sound, but every Imperial scanner lit up with warnings. The first blast came from its main cannon, a beam of concentrated light that sliced through the nearest destroyer, cutting it clean in half. The second shot vaporized 2 cruisers in an instant. Panic erupted through the fleet. Formations collapsed. Threxen shouted orders, but communications jammed. The Retribution systems disrupted every channel. Every attempt to scan it only returned errors. Within minutes, the disciplined Imperial fleet had turned into chaos. The Retribution continued its attack, methodically precise. One by one, the Empire's warships fell, their armor melting, their cores exploding into blue fire. The human vessel never missed a shot and never took damage. It was like watching a god dismantle a swarm of insects. The screams of dying soldiers filled the comm network. The Admiral tried to rally his remaining ships, but then the Retribution released a pulse that swept across the battlefield. Every Imperial ship's power grid shut down. Engines died, lights went dark. In the silent void, the last image recorded by an Imperial drone showed the Retribution scanning the wreckage as if studying its work. Then in an instant it vanished, fading into nothing. When the rescue teams arrived days later, they found no survivors. Only drifting hulls and fragments melted by heat far beyond known weaponry. The Empire's analysts studied the data, but nothing made sense. The ship's energy signature did not match any known source. Its method of arrival and disappearance defied every law of physics. The only clear message was the transmission left behind by the human commander. The words played again and again on the central screens. "We warned you once. Stay away." In the following weeks, rumors spread across the galaxy. Entire star systems whispered of a human ghost ship that appeared from nowhere and destroyed fleets with godlike precision. The Empire tried to silence the reports, but fear was already spreading like wildfire. The once invincible Galactic Empire had been struck by an unknown power. The High Command demanded answers, but there were none. And far beyond their reach, hidden deep within the dark spaces between stars, something watched them silently. The Terran warship Retribution floated unseen, its crew calm and focused, waiting for their next order. They did not seek conquest. They were there for one purpose only: to protect humanity from any who would dare to threaten it again. The destruction of the 9th Imperial Fleet sent waves of fear through the Galactic Empire. Worlds that had never seen battle began to whisper of ghosts in the void. The official report stated that a gravitational anomaly had caused the loss, but no one believed that the surviving fragments of communication logs told a different story. The words, "This is the Terran warship Retribution," were recorded by several damaged probes, and this message alone spread panic through every rank of the military. The idea that a human ship could destroy one of the Empire's strongest fleets was too much for anyone to accept. For centuries, humans had been seen as a weak and unimportant race who barely knew how to travel beyond their small solar system, and now they were being spoken of as the destroyers of fleets. Admirals demanded answers. Scientists searched for logic, and spies were sent to find the truth. At the Imperial Palace on Virex Prime, the Council gathered in secret. The room was filled with high-ranking officials wearing the silver robes of command and the dark eyes of fear. The Emperor himself did not speak at first. He simply listened to the reports that came from the front lines. The loss of 23 warships could not be hidden, and the rumors had already reached the outer colonies. One of the generals tried to calm the council by saying it was likely an advanced rebel group or a hidden alien faction, but when the recordings of the human voice were played, the chamber fell silent. No one could deny what they heard. The Emperor finally raised his hand, and his voice echoed across the marble walls. "Send a recon fleet," he said. "Find this retribution and bring me its wreckage, or bring me proof that humans are not behind it." Across the Empire, preparations began quickly. A new fleet was gathered under the command of Admiral Kareth Solon, a man known for his bold tactics and his unshakable belief in the Empire's power. He was told that his mission was simple: to locate the unknown human warship and destroy it before its existence could inspire fear among other species. Admiral Solon was confident, and he laughed when he heard the tales of the retribution. He said, "No human could outfight the Empire. No single ship could defeat the might of thousands of years of dominance." His words lifted the morale of his crew, but deep inside, some officers still remembered the stories they had heard what happened to Threxon's fleet, and they knew that something beyond reason had destroyed it. The new fleet consisted of 30 battleships equipped with the Empire's newest weapons. They jumped into the frontier system where the last fleet had vanished. Their scanners swept through every corner of space, but for days, they found nothing. The system was empty, cold, and lifeless. Only debris floated in silence, the remains of the ships that once belonged to Threxon. Admiral Solon stood on the bridge looking at the wreckage on the main screen. His expression turned serious for the first time. He ordered probes to be sent out and the crews to collect what data they could. They found melted armor fragments, twisted metal, and radiation levels that no Imperial weapon could produce. The science officers tried to explain it as a new type of energy discharge, but none could find the source. Just when they were about to leave the system, the long-range sensors picked up something strange. A faint energy signature was detected far beyond the edge of the system. It was faint but stable, and unlike anything in their database, Solon ordered the fleet to approach cautiously. The closer they got, the stronger the readings became until the signal became clear. The ship was there, hidden behind a drifting asteroid field. It was not moving, but it was active. The Terran warship Retribution waited silently in the shadows. The Imperial fleet moved into formation and powered up their weapons. The Admiral sent a wide-band transmission, demanding the ship identify itself. There was no answer. The silence lasted for a long minute. Then the same calm human voice that had been recorded before filled the communication channel. "You were warned." Admiral Solon tried to negotiate, saying that the Empire had no wish for unnecessary conflict and that the human vessel must surrender for inspection. But the voice did not respond again. It only said, "Leave now, before it is too late." The Empire did not retreat. Solon ordered all ships to target the Retribution and fire at once. Thousands of plasma beams streaked across the dark space and exploded against the unseen barrier surrounding the human ship. The shockwaves lit the stars, but when the light faded, the Retribution still stood untouched. Its surface glowed faintly blue, and the next second, it began to move. It advanced slowly, but with a sense of unstoppable power. The Empire's scanners began to fail one by one. Systems overloaded, and engines flickered. The Retribution's main cannon charged, and with a single shot, it tore through the nearest destroyer. The explosion was so bright it blinded half the crew on nearby ships. Solon shouted for his fleet to scatter, but the Retribution was faster than anything they had ever seen. It turned without inertia and moved with perfect control. Its secondary weapons fired thin white beams that sliced through cruisers like paper. Every hit was exact, no shot missed. The human ship fought without anger, without hesitation. It was as if it had already calculated every possible move and knew the outcome before the battle even began. The Imperial ships tried to form defensive positions, but every time they regrouped, another ship exploded. In the middle of the chaos, one of Solon's officers shouted that they were detecting energy build up around the human vessel far greater than anything before. The Retribution then released a wave of pure light that swept across the fleet. Every electronic system shut down. Shields failed. Engines stopped and weapons went silent. The Imperial ships drifted helplessly in space, unable to move or communicate. The Retribution stopped firing and floated among them like a dark god looking down on broken toys. Then it transmitted one final message. You came seeking death. Do not return. The ship vanished again, fading into the black void, leaving behind only silence. When the Imperial survivors were finally rescued, their stories spread faster than any order to stay quiet could contain them. Some said the human ship could bend reality itself. Others claimed it used technology older than the stars. Whatever the truth was, one thing became clear to everyone. The Empire was no longer the only power in the galaxy. Fear began to grow among the governors of distant worlds, and rebellions started to rise on planets that had been silent for centuries. The Emperor demanded that the scientists find a way to locate and destroy the Retribution. But every attempt failed. Every trace disappeared, as if the ship never existed. In the deep space near the borders of human territory, the Retribution appeared once more. Its black hull glowed faintly as it entered orbit around a barren planet. The crew inside was calm and silent. The commander, Admiral Rains, looked over the stars from the bridge. He was a man of few words, his eyes tired from years of preparation. The other officers around him were humans, too trained and hardened by secrets. No outsider knew. They had built this ship not for conquest but for protection. Humanity had learned long ago that the galaxy was cruel and only the strong survived. The Empire had once tried to enslave Earth, but Earth had fought back in silence, building strength hidden from the eyes of the galaxy. Now when the Empire reached again, humanity was ready. Admiral Rains watched the empty stars and said softly, "They will come again, and when they do, we will be ready." The crew nodded in silence. The Retribution's engines powered down and the ship vanished once more into the folds of space, leaving no trace behind. While far away on Virex Prime, the Empire trembled at the thought of a single human warship that could erase entire fleets without a trace. The defeat of Admiral Solin's fleet changed everything in the Galactic Empire. No one spoke of it openly, but everyone knew that something had broken deep inside the heart of their mighty civilization. The empire that once ruled thousands of systems without question now lived under a shadow of fear. The name of the human ship, the Retribution, spread like a whisper across the stars. Worlds that had once feared the Empire began to hope again. Small rebellions that were crushed in silence before now stirred with courage, because they believed the Empire could bleed. The High Command tried to stop the rumors, but the soldiers spoke among themselves. They had seen the data fragments and heard the recordings of the human voice. They knew it was real, and that no Imperial fleet had survived against it. The Emperor ordered that every trace of the incident be erased, but even he could not stop the growing fear that spread faster than light. On the cold military planet of Virex Prime, scientists worked endlessly to find a way to understand the Retribution. They examined the wreckage from the destroyed fleets, but every piece of debris defied logic. The melted metals were unlike any known substance. The radiation signatures showed energy forms unknown to their physics. It was as if the ship had been made from material outside normal space. Some even whispered that humans had discovered how to control the fabric of reality itself. The Emperor refused to believe it. He ordered the creation of Project Spear, a secret mission to locate Earth and end the human threat once and for all. The order was simple: to invade their home world, destroy whatever power they had, and erase them from existence. While the Empire moved in fear and anger, humanity remained hidden. Admiral Rains and his crew on the Retribution had returned to a secret human command base buried inside a quiet nebula. The ship floated silently among the dust clouds, its black hull blending into the darkness. Inside the warship, the crew gathered in the strategy room around a large holographic map of the galaxy. The map showed red markings where the Empire's fleets had begun to move closer to the Sol system. Rains looked at it with calm eyes. He had expected this. The Empire was arrogant. They would never stop until they tried to prove their dominance again. The human commander knew the war was coming, not because humanity wanted it, but because the Empire would never allow anyone to challenge its rule. The crew was small but highly trained. Each member had survived the early years when humanity was still rebuilding after the first wars with alien empires. They had watched as Earth learned to fight back quietly. They built hidden colonies in the dark corners of space and developed technologies that others said were impossible, quantum phase. Drives allowed their ships to appear and disappear anywhere in the galaxy. The Retribution was the only fully armed warship of its kind. It could travel through layers of reality, slipping between space and time. The humans had built it not to conquer, but to protect themselves from extinction. Now that the Empire had found them, the Retribution was the only thing standing between survival and destruction. One of the officers, a woman named Lieutenant Cara Vale, looked at the map and said, "The Empire is coming with everything they have. They will not stop until they find Earth." Rains nodded and said, "They will come, and when they do, we will show them why they should have left us in peace." He turned to his communication officer and ordered, "Send a coded message to command. Tell them to activate the defense grid and prepare the other vessels humanity will no longer hide." Back in the Imperial capital, the Emperor sat in silence, staring out of the palace window toward the night sky. He was not a man easily frightened, but he could not forget the reports: 2 fleets gone with no survivors, each destroyed by one ship built by a race they once considered inferior. His advisors spoke around him, offering plans of attack and theories of human power. Some believed the humans had found an ancient weapon left by a lost civilization. Others said they were aided by unknown forces. The Emperor listened to none of it. He finally said, "The humans have challenged the throne of eternity. They think they can defy the will of the Empire. We will crush them until their very name is forgotten." He ordered the grand mobilization of the entire outer fleet, more than 1,000 warships supported by dreadnoughts and carriers. It was the largest force ever assembled since the founding of the Empire, and its goal was simple: to find and destroy the Retribution. The Imperial Armada began its journey through hyperspace, their ships glowing with power. Engines thundered as they jumped from system to system, searching for any sign of the human vessel. In their arrogance, they did not know that the Retribution was already watching them from within. A dense nebula, the human ship tracked every move through advanced quantum sensors. The Empire thought they were hunting, but they were the ones being hunted. Rains stood at the command bridge, watching the display as hundreds of red dots moved closer to the outer borders of human space. He did not smile. He only said quietly, "They are coming right on schedule." The crew prepared the ship for battle. Every system was checked, every weapon calibrated. The power core glowed faintly with blue light as the phase drive charged. Rains gave his final order: "Initiate shadow protocol." The ship began to fade from visible space, slowly dissolving until it became invisible to all sensors. The Retribution moved silently across the void, heading toward the incoming armada. The crew spoke little. They all knew what was about to happen. Each of them had lost family to the Empire long ago, and now their moment had come, not for revenge, but for justice. Hours later, the Empire's armada reached the outskirts of the Sol system. They expected to find primitive defenses, but instead they found nothing. The space around them was silent. The admiral in command of the fleet reported to the Emperor through secure channels, saying, "We have reached human territory, but there are no ships, no signals, no resistance. It is empty." The Emperor ordered him to advance further and destroy anything that appeared. Suddenly, the sensors of the lead dreadnought picked up an anomaly. Space ahead of them began to distort like a heat wave spreading through the stars. Before they could react, the distortion opened and the Retribution emerged. The black warship appeared without warning directly in front of the entire armada. Its engines flared with cold blue fire, and for a moment, no one moved. The Imperial Admiral gave the order to fire all weapons at once. Thousands of energy bolts raced toward the human ship, and the void exploded in light. When the brightness faded, the Retribution was still there, unharmed. Its shield glowed like a living storm. Then the human ship fired back. A single pulse beam erupted from its cannon, tearing through the front lines in one shot. 3 Imperial battleships were destroyed instantly. The rest of the fleet tried to scatter, but the Retribution moved too fast. It weaved through the chaos, its weapons slicing through enemy ships with precision. Every explosion painted the darkness with fire. The Imperial Admiral shouted for reinforcements, but communications failed again. The Retribution released a jamming field that blocked every signal. The fleet was blind and helpless. The human ship continued its assault, cutting through dreadnoughts and cruisers as if they were paper. The crew on the Retribution worked with calm discipline. Every shot they fired was calculated, every movement exact. Within minutes, hundreds of Imperial ships were burning. The human vessel showed no sign of damage. Its armor absorbed everything thrown at it. Rain stood watching the destruction. Silently, he did not celebrate. He only whispered. They were warned. When the battle ended, only wreckage remained, drifting silently in the void. The Retribution scanned the area, ensuring no survivors remained to report what had happened. Then the ship vanished once more into nothing, leaving behind only silence. On the Imperial capital, the Emperor waited for the victory message that would never come. As the hours passed and no reports arrived, his hands began to tremble. He realized the unthinkable. The Empire, the eternal power of the galaxy, had been defeated 3 times by a single human warship. In that moment, he understood that something far greater than his empire now moved among the stars, and that humanity had become the one force he could neither control nor destroy. The Empire was collapsing from the inside. The defeat of the Grand Armada was the greatest shame in its history. The Emperor, who once stood as the unchallenged ruler of the galaxy, now lived in silent fear. Every corner of the Empire whispered the same name: the Retribution. That word had become a symbol of terror and defiance. Across the colonies, people began to question the power of the throne. Soldiers hesitated to fight. Rebels rose again on forgotten worlds. The Empire tried to hide the truth, but the destruction of an entire armada could not be denied. Too many witnesses had escaped the flames, and every survivor told the same story about a human ship that appeared from nothing and destroyed everything in its path. The Empire's command lost its unity. Admirals began to turn against each other, accusing one another of weakness and betrayal. The once perfect order of control turned into chaos and fear. The Emperor called a secret meeting inside the Black Tower of Virex Prime. His most trusted scientists and commanders gathered around him. They had been working without rest to understand how one human ship could destroy their fleets. The head scientist, Dr. Marn, brought forth a projection showing fragments of data collected from the wreckage. He explained that the Retribution used energy that existed outside normal space. He said that its engines were not based on hyperspace drives like Imperial ships, but something far more advanced. He called it phase manipulation. It allowed the human vessel to move between dimensions, skipping the barriers of space and time. The Emperor listened quietly, his face pale with anger. He demanded to know how humans could have discovered such power. Dr. Marn hesitated before saying that humans must have evolved faster than anyone expected. They had hidden their progress from the galaxy, building their technology in secret for centuries. The Emperor struck the table with his hand and shouted, "No primitive race could surpass the Empire. They must have stolen it from someone. Find out who gave them this power." In the shadows of the Empire, secret orders were sent out. Agents known as the Seekers were dispatched to locate Earth. They used every tool and every informant, but each expedition vanished without a trace. The humans had hidden their homeworld well. The Seekers reported strange phenomena in the regions they searched. Ships disappeared without distress, calls and communication probes were lost completely. It was as if space itself refused to reveal the location of humanity. Meanwhile, the Retribution continued to strike Imperial forces without warning. It appeared in one system, destroyed a fleet or an outpost, then vanished again. Every time it attacked, it left the same message: leave human space or face extinction. The Empire tried to chase it, but the ship always disappeared before they could catch it. Admiral Rains and his crew knew the Empire would never stop. The war had become unavoidable. The humans no longer hid in silence. They had begun to build new ships smaller than the Retribution, but powered by the same phase technology. The shipyards hidden in deep space worked day and night. There, goal was not to conquer, but to protect what they had built. Earth had united under one command after centuries of division. The human government known as the Terran Alliance stood behind Reigns completely. Their leaders sent messages to every hidden colony telling them to prepare for defense. The Empire had brought war to their door, and now humanity would answer it. Inside the command bridge of the Retribution, Reigns watched a transmission from Earth. The face of the Supreme Commander appeared, calm, but his eyes were filled with determination. He said, "Admiral, the time for hiding is over. The Empire will send its full force, and they will not stop until we are erased. We must make them understand that humanity is not their prey." Reigns nodded and answered, "Humanity has endured everything the galaxy threw at it. We will endure this too." The commander said, "We are sending coordinates for joint operations. You and your crew will lead the counterstrike." Then the screen went dark. The Retribution began to move through space, its engines humming with quiet energy. The crew knew what was coming. They had trained for years, but the scale of the next battle would decide the future of their species. The Empire had already begun gathering the remnants of its fleets into one final army. The Emperor believed that if he destroyed the Retribution, all the rebellion and fear would end. He built a massive space fortress near the edge of the Orion Rift, a fortress larger than any station ever made. It was designed with new experimental weapons that could disrupt phase energy. The Empire poured everything it had left into this project, believing it to be their salvation. When news of the fortress reached human intelligence, Admiral Reigns understood the challenge. He ordered the Retribution to lead a small group of new Terran warships into the rift. Their mission was to destroy the fortress before it could become fully operational. The humans moved through the darkness unseen until they reached the edge of the rift. There it stood, a giant structure of black metal surrounded by hundreds of Imperial ships. The fortress glowed with red energy as its weapons charged. Reigns looked at it and said softly, "This is where the Empire's pride will die." The human ships activated their phase drives and vanished from normal space. Moving silently toward their target, the battle began without warning. The Retribution appeared behind the Imperial lines and fired its main cannon. The blast tore through a cluster of cruisers in one strike. The Terran fleet emerged seconds later, opening fire from multiple directions. The Imperial ships turned in confusion, firing wildly into the dark, trying to hit the invisible enemy. The fortress activated its disruptor field, and the entire space around it began to shimmer. The humans felt the strain on their systems, but they adapted quickly, using new algorithms to stabilize the phase drive. Reigns ordered his weapons officer to target the fortress core. The Retribution charged its main cannon and fired a beam straight into the station's power grid. The explosion was massive, shaking the rift itself, but the fortress did not fall. It fired back with a beam of red light that struck the Retribution's shields for the first time. The crew struggled to maintain control as alarms echoed through the ship. The impact was strong, but the shields held. Reigns ordered a full counterattack, so Terran ships surrounded the fortress, releasing a storm of missiles and plasma bursts. The Imperial ships fought desperately, but their formations were broken. The battle lasted for hours as fire and debris filled the void. The humans fought with precision, every maneuver calculated by the Retribution's artificial intelligence, which had been trained to predict enemy patterns. The Empire's numbers began to fall rapidly, their ships collapsing one by one. The fortress tried to activate its final weapon, a planetary-class energy beam, but the Retribution struck again, this time hitting the control core directly. The explosion that followed was brighter than a sun. The entire fortress broke apart, and its fragments scattered across the rift. As the light faded, the Imperial survivors retreated. They had never seen such destruction from a small fleet of human ships. The Retribution floated among the wreckage, silent and victorious. The crew watched the burning remains of the fortress, and none of them spoke. They knew this victory would echo through the galaxy. Reigns stood on the bridge looking at the stars. He said quietly, "They will not stop, but neither will we. We have shown them what it means to face humanity." News of the defeat reached the Imperial capital faster than light. The Emperor could not hide it this time. The people rose in anger and fear. Protests spread across planets demanding peace or freedom. Entire systems declared independence, saying they no longer recognized imperial rule. The once eternal empire began to crumble from within. The council turned against the Emperor, blaming him for bringing ruin upon them. He ordered mass executions, but it was too late. The old order had fallen, and in the chaos, the voice of the humans echoed across the stars again. A single transmission broadcasted to every world said, "We sought peace, and you answered with war. You brought destruction to our worlds, and now you have reaped what you sowed. Humanity asks for nothing, but respect. Leave our borders, and you will live. Cross them again, and you will fall." The message ended, and with it, the age of the Empire began to fade away, as the galaxy finally understood that humanity had risen beyond fear, and that the retribution was not just a ship, it was the symbol of a species that refused to kneel ever again. The galaxy was silent after the fall of the Imperial fortress, but silence in space never lasted long. Rumors spread faster than light. Some said the Emperor had been killed. Others said he had vanished into the outer systems to rebuild what was left of his power. The truth was that the Empire was dying. Its fleets were broken, its colonies were in rebellion, and its people had lost faith. The once mighty government that had ruled thousands of worlds with fear was now struggling to survive, and while the Empire tried to hold itself together, the humans were not resting. The retribution had returned to the hidden Terran shipyards for repair after the long battle. The ship bore scars across its hull, but it was still alive, still powerful. Still feared Admiral Rains stood on the observation deck, watching workers move like tiny insects across the massive vessel. Every bolt, every burn mark was a reminder of the war they had fought and the one that was still coming. Rains knew the Empire would not vanish easily. Even in defeat, there were those who refused to accept that humans had risen to challenge them. Many of the Imperial admirals who had escaped. The rift gathered in secret. They blamed the Emperor for their humiliation and decided to take control of what remained of the fleets. They called themselves the Dominion, a name that echoed the Empire's old pride. But they had one purpose: to destroy humanity and reclaim the lost honor of their race. They began rebuilding in the shadows using hidden shipyards and stolen resources. For months they stayed quiet, pretending to be broken, while secretly developing a weapon that could rival the retribution back. On Earth, the Terran Alliance was preparing for the unknown. The leaders met every day to decide how to deal with the changing galaxy. Some believed they should strike now and finish what the war had started. Others argued for peace, saying that humanity had already proved its strength and should not become what the Empire once was. Admiral Rains listened to all sides, but he knew something none of them did. He had seen the darkness that remained in the eyes of the enemy. They were not finished. Not yet. He told the council that war was not over, and that the Dominion was rising again, but some refused to believe him. They thought fear was making him see enemies everywhere. So Rains took it upon himself to find proof. He ordered the retribution to begin deep space patrol missions far beyond known borders, searching for signs of the hidden fleets. Weeks passed in silence. The crew grew restless. They had fought so hard and sacrificed so much, yet they were again flying through empty space, chasing ghosts. Then one day the ship detected strange energy readings from the edge of the Perseid expanse. The readings matched the type of power used by Imperial ships, but much stronger. Rains ordered the ship to cloak and approach slowly the EI. Closer they got, the clearer the image became, and what they saw made everyone on the bridge silent. In front of them floated a structure larger than any fortress ever built. It was surrounded by hundreds of newly constructed battleships, all bearing the insignia of the Dominion. The humans watched in disbelief as energy pulses glowed from the heart of the structure. Rains understood at once that it was a superweapon capable of destroying entire planets. He ordered a full scan, and the data confirmed his fears. The Dominion had built a weapon using stolen fragments of phase technology taken from the wrecks of Imperial ships that had faced the retribution. They were trying to copy human power to destroy humanity itself. The weapon was called the Eye of Wrath, and it was almost ready to fire. Rains knew they could not let it live. He sent an encrypted message to Earth warning the Alliance, but communication was intercepted. The Dominion had blocked long-range transmissions, trapping the Retribution alone in hostile space. They had no backup, no allies, and no time. Rains made a decision that could change the course of the galaxy. He ordered the crew to prepare for a direct strike. The Retribution moved closer, hidden within the shadows of the expanse. The Dominion fleet was testing their new ships, unaware that death was moving silently toward them. Rains stood calm, though he knew the odds were impossible. He said quietly to his crew, "If we fail, humanity falls. If we succeed, the galaxy will remember that we never backed down." The crew responded with silent determination. Every hand moved across the control panels, every eye fixed on the battle screens. The ship's engines pulsed with blue light as the phase drive charged. Once again, the human warship disappeared from sight and slipped through dimensions. They appeared right above the heart of the Dominion formation. The surprise was complete. The Retribution fired all forward cannons at once. The blast tore through several ships and caused a chain reaction of explosions. The Dominion fleet scattered in panic, trying to locate the invisible attacker. But the humans were already moving, firing again and again. The Eye of Wrath began to charge its main weapon, a red beam of power building in its core. Rains ordered his tactical officer to target the energy conduits. The Retribution fired its main cannon, and the beam hit the structure, causing a violent shockwave, but it was not enough. The Eye kept charging, faster and faster. The enemy admiral's voice filled the comms, saying, "You humans cannot win this time. Your strength ends today." Rains did not reply. He simply said to his crew, "Hold steady. We are not done yet." The Eye of Wrath unleashed its beam. The space around it twisted as a red wave shot toward the Retribution. The shields flared and cracked. The crew was thrown against the walls. Alarms screamed across the bridge. The impact was massive, but the ship held together barely. The main power was failing. Systems flickered. The hull was burning, but Rains refused to retreat. He looked at his engineer and said, "Divert everything to the cannon. We fire again now." The engineer hesitated and said, "It will overload the core." Rains replied, "Then, we die making sure they do too." The order was given. The Retribution charged one last time. The light from its core grew brighter and brighter until the entire ship seemed to glow. Then it fired. The beam cut through space like a blade, hitting the Eye directly in its center. The explosion that followed was like the birth of a new star. The shockwave destroyed half of the Dominion fleet instantly. Ships were torn apart and thrown into the void. The Eye of Wrath shattered into burning fragments. The Retribution was caught in the explosion too. Its systems went dark. The hull split open and silence filled the bridge. The crew floated in darkness, unsure if they were alive or dead. Then slowly, emergency lights came on. The ship was still there, heavily damaged but alive. The Dominion survivors fled, knowing they could not face what was left of the human warship. The Retribution drifted among the ruins, engines, dead weapons, silent, but victorious. Hours later, a rescue fleet from the Terran Alliance arrived. They had received the final fragments of Rains's transmission. Just before the explosion, they found the Retribution half destroyed, but still glowing faintly with energy. When they boarded the ship, they found Rains standing on the bridge, injured but alive. He looked at the stars through the cracked glass and said softly, "It is done. The Eye is gone." The humans had won again, but at a great cost. The Retribution would never fully recover, but its legacy had already become legend. When the news reached the rest of the galaxy, even the remaining Imperial worlds bowed their heads. They understood that humanity could not be broken. The Dominion collapsed soon after their leaders captured or killed. The Emperor himself was finally found hiding on a barren world, stripped of his power. When confronted, he said, bitterly, "You are not conquerors, you are monsters." Rains, who led the mission to capture him, answered quietly, "No, we are survivors, and we do not kneel." The war was over at last. The galaxy entered a new age of balance. The Terran Alliance became a symbol, of freedom and strength for other races who had lived in fear under the Empire. They began to form alliances, trade routes, and peace agreements. Humanity no longer stood alone. They had earned the respect of the stars. But for Admiral Rains and his crew, the memory of the battles never faded. They knew peace would never be permanent, but they also knew that whatever came next, humanity would be ready, because they had faced the greatest empire in the galaxy and won. And the Retribution, now resting in orbit above Earth, became the eternal reminder of what humans could achieve when pushed to the edge, and how one ship, one crew, and one choice changed the fate of the entire universe forever. Years passed since the Great War ended, and peace finally began to settle over the galaxy. The wounds of the battles were deep, but time had started to heal them. The name of the Retribution was now known in every corner of the stars, and even the youngest children on distant colonies spoke about the ship and its crew with pride and awe. The story of the human warship that appeared from nothing and changed the fate of the galaxy had become a legend that no one could forget. The Terran alliance had grown stronger, forming new relations with races that once feared or hated them. Trade had replaced conflict and science replaced destruction. The galaxy had entered a golden age led by the same species that the Empire had once called primitive. Admiral Rains had retired years ago, leaving behind a record that could never be matched. He spent his final years teaching young cadets in the new academy, built near Earth's orbit. The academy was a great ring station shining with silver light where students from different species came together to learn the lessons of unity and strength. He would often stand by the large observation window looking at the stars and remember the war. The faces of those he had lost still visited his thoughts. He missed his crew deeply, many of whom had given their lives to protect a dream of freedom that few had believed possible. He often said to his students that victory did not come from strength alone, but from courage and faith in one another. The Retribution itself had been moved to the orbital museum around Earth. Its hull was repaired, but its weapons were deactivated. It now floated in silence like a monument to human will. Thousands visited it every day, walking through its long corridors and looking at the burn marks that still remained from the final battle. The voice recordings of the crew played softly through the speakers as visitors stood in silence, imagining what it must have been like when the ship faced the Dominion's weapon. The Retribution was no longer a war machine. It was a symbol, a message that no power, no empire, no force in the universe could ever crush the heart of humanity. But not everything was peaceful beneath the quiet surface of the New Age. Shadows still moved. In the farthest reaches of the void, beyond known space, something was stirring again. Old Imperial probes that had been thought destroyed began transmitting weak signals back to life. Some explorers who ventured too far never returned, and whispers spread through the colonies about strange lights moving between the stars. The Terran Alliance sent scouts to investigate, but most of them found nothing. Only fragments of data came back, showing energy readings similar to those once used by the Dominion. It was small at first, but the pattern began to grow stronger. Some scientists said it was impossible that the technology had been wiped out. Others said maybe something or someone had survived and was waiting. One day, an Alliance patrol ship near the Perseid Expanse received a distress signal. It was weak and filled with static, but the message repeated the same word over and over: Retribution. The patrol ship traced the signal to the edge of a broken star system that had been destroyed in the final war. When they arrived, they found something unbelievable floating in the ruins. Was a massive metallic structure glowing faintly. It looked like a wreck, but the design was unmistakable. It was based on human engineering, but twisted and different. The patrol sent a drone closer, and the reading showed the same phase energy once used by Admiral Rains's ship, but corrupted. The signal grew louder, and then stopped. Suddenly the structure powered up and vanished into the dark, leaving behind a faint echo of human technology mixed with something unknown. When the report reached the Alliance Council, they were divided again. Some believed it was nothing more than a glitch or leftover debris from the war, but others feared it was a sign that humanity's greatest weapon had been copied. Rains, though retired, was called back as an advisor. He was old now, his hair gray, his steps slower, but his eyes still sharp. When he saw the recordings, he felt a chill. It was not the retribution, but something that had learned. From it, he told the council that the galaxy was changing again and that peace never lasted forever. Humanity had to stay ready, not because they wanted war, but because someone somewhere always would. He asked the Alliance to prepare to defend, not just humans, but every world that trusted them. He said calmly that this was the burden of leadership, that once you held power, you had to protect with it. The young admirals listened closely. They had grown up hearing his name and stories about the war, but now they saw the man behind the legend. He told them to look at the stars not with fear but with respect, because every star held a mystery that could change the galaxy again. The Alliance began new research projects to improve phase technology, but this time for peaceful use. They developed ships that could travel faster than ever before. They built stations near distant suns where humans and aliens worked together as one. The memory of the Empire was fading, and the name of humanity was now spoken with honor, not fear. As for Rains, he spent his final days back on Earth near the coast where he was born. He liked to walk along the cliffs and watch the ocean waves crash against the rocks. To him, the sound was like space, endless, powerful, and full of secrets. One night, as he looked up at the stars, he saw a bright flash move across the sky, and he smiled. He whispered to himself that the galaxy would always test humanity, but they would always rise again. The next morning, he was found, sitting on a bench still looking at the horizon, peaceful and calm. The news of his passing spread quickly, and for the first time in many years, every planet in the Alliance went silent to honor him. On the day of his memorial, the retribution was illuminated brighter than ever before. Millions of people gathered across the galaxy to watch the ceremony broadcasted live. The captain of the new flagship, named Guardian of Earth, spoke softly, saying that humanity's strength was not in weapons, but in the will to protect. The crowd stood in silence as the light from the ship filled the sky, forming the shape of the old Terran emblem. It was a simple symbol of unity and courage. The words engraved below it read, "We came from nothing, and we became everything." The retribution remained in orbit, its engines forever silent, but its presence eternal. Years later, children in faraway colonies still learned about the battle where the human warship appeared from nothing and changed the course of history. They learned how a single act of bravery could shake empires and bring hope to worlds. They learned that humanity was not perfect, but it was relentless, and that even in darkness, it could create light. The galaxy had become peaceful, but the story of the retribution continued to live in the hearts of everyone who looked at the stars and believed that no matter how vast the universe became, there would always be one truth. Humans would always stand together. They would always fight for freedom, and they would always rise again from the ashes stronger than before. And somewhere far away in the quiet of deep space, where no signal could reach, a single piece of metal drifted through the void. It was old and scarred and covered in dust, but inside it a faint light still pulsed like a heartbeat. The marking on the side was almost gone, but if one looked closely, the letters could still be seen: RETRIBUTION. The ship that refused to die still.